16. In the 36th year of Asher's region, and Bala king of Israel went up against Judah and fortified Ramah to prevent anyone from leaving or entering the territory of Asher king of Judah. Asher then took the silver and gold out of the treasuries of the Lord's temple and of his own palace, and sent it to Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, who had ruling in Damascus. Let there be a treaty between me and you, he said, as there was between my father and your father. See, I am sending you silver and gold. Now break your treaty with Baasha king of Israel, so he will withdraw from me. Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asher and sent the commanders of the forces against the towns of Israel. They conquered Ephraim, then Abermain, and all the store cities of Naphtali. When Baasha heard this, he stopped building Ramah and abandoned his work. The king Asher brought all the men of Judah, and they carried away from Ramah the stones and timber Baasha had been using. With them he built Geber and Mizpah. At that time, Hananiah the seer came to Asher king of Judah and said to him, because you relied on the king of Aram and not the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped from your hands. Were not the Cushite and the Lebanese a mighty army with a great number of chariots and horsemen? Yet when you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hands. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth of strengthening those whose hearts are fully committed to him. You have done a foolish thing, and from now on you will be at war. Asher was angry with the seer because of this. He was so enraged that he put him in prison. At the same time, Asher brutally oppressed some of the people. The events of Asher's region, from beginning to the end, are written in the books of the kings of Judah and Israel. In the 39th year of his region, Asher was afflicted with a disease in his feet. Through his disease he was served. Even in his illness, he did not seek help from the Lord, but only from the priests. Then in the 41st year of his region, Asher died and rested with his fathers. Then buried him in the tomb that he had cut out for himself in the city of David. They laid him on the bier covered with spices and various blended perfumes, and they made a huge fire in his honor. 17. Jephthah's son succeeded him as king and strengthened himself against Israel. He stationed troops in all the fortified cities of Judah and put Gershonites in Judah and in the towns of Ephraim that his father Asher had captured. The Lord was with Jephthah because in his early years he walked in the ways of his father David had allowed. He did not consult the Baals, but sought the God of his fathers and followed his commands rather than the practice of the Israel. The Lord established the kingdom under his control, and all Judah brought gifts to Jephthah, so that he had great wealth and honor. His heart was devoted to the ways of the Lord. Fortified, he removed the high places and the Asherah pole from Judah. In the 3rd year of his region, he sent his officers Ben-Hali, Obed-Zerah, Nathan, and Micah to teach in the towns of Judah. With them were certain Levites, Shemaiah, Nathan, Jodobal, Asher, Shemetis, Jonathan, Adonis, Tobes, and Tovadonis, and the priests Elishon and Jeroboam. They taught throughout Judah, taking with them to the book of the laws of the Lord. They went around to all the towns of Judah and taught the people. The fear of the Lord fell on all the kingdoms of the land surrounding Judah, so that they did not make war with Jephthah. Some Philistines brought Jephthah gifts and silver as tribute, and Arabians brought him flocks, 7,700 rams and 7,700 goats. Jephthah brought more and more powerful. He began to build forts and store cities in Judah, and he had large supplies in the towns of Judah. He also kept experienced fighting men in Jerusalem. Their intolerance by families was as follows. From Judah, commander of units of thousands, Adonai, the commander of 300,000 fighting men. Next, Jeremiah, the commander with 280,000. Next, Amasa, son of Jerchus, who volunteered himself for the service of the Lord, with 200,000. From Benjamin, Eliada the disorder with 200,000 men armed with bows and shields. Next, Josiah was 180,000. 6,000 men armed for battle. These were the men who served the king, besides those who stationed in the fortified cities throughout Judah. 18. Now Jephthah had great wealth and honor, and he allied himself with Ahab by marriage. Some year later he went down to visit Ahab in Samaria. Ahab slaughtered many sheep and cattle for him, and the poor with him, and urged him to attack Ramoth-Gilead. Ahab, king of Israel, asked Jephthah, king of Judah, "Will you go with me against Ramoth-Gilead?" Jephthah replied, "I am as you are, and my people as your people. We will join you in the war." But Jephthah also said to the king of Israel, "First seek a counsel of the Lord." So the king of Israel brought together the prophets, 400 men, and asked them, "Shall we go to war against Ramoth-Gilead, or shall I refrain?" "Go," they answered, "for God will give it into the king's hand." But Jephthah asked, "Is there not a prophet of the Lord here whom we can inquire of?" The king of Israel answered Jephthah, "There is still one man through whom we can inquire of the Lord, but I hate him because he never prophesies anything good about me, but always bad. He is Micah, son of Ilma." "The king should not say that," Jephthah replied. So the king of Israel called out one of his officers and said, "Bring Micah, son of Micah, at once." Dressed in their royal robes, the king of Israel and Jephthah, king of Judah, were sitting on their thrones at the threshing floor by the entrance of Samaria, with all his prophets prophesying before them. Now Jephthah, son of Chemra, had made iron horns, and he declared, "This is what the Lord says. Which you will gore the armies until they were destroyed." All the other prophets were prophesying the same thing. "Attack Ramoth-Gilead and be victorious," they said, "for the Lord will give it into the king's hand." The messenger who had gone to summon Micah said to him, "Look, as one man the other prophets are predicting success for the king. Let your word agree with theirs and speak favorably." But Micah said, "As surely as the Lord lives, I can tell him only what my God says." When he arrived, the king asked him, "Micah, shall we go to war against Ramoth-Gilead, or shall I refrain?" "Attack and be victorious," he answered, "for they will be given into your hands." The king said to him, "How many times must I make you swear to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord?" Then Micah answered, "I saw Israel scattered on the hills like sheep without a shepherd, and the Lord says, these people had no masters. Let each one go home in peace." The king of Israel said to Jephthah, "Didn't I tell you that he never prophesies anything good about me, but only bad?" Micah continued, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the hosts of heaven standing on his right and on his left. And the Lord says, Who enticed Ahab, king of Israel, into attacking Ramoth-Gilead and going to his death here?" One suggested this, another that. Finally a spirit came forward, stood before the Lord, and said, "I will entice him." "But what means?" the Lord asked. "I will go and be a lying spirit in the mouths of all his prophets," he said. "You will be succeed in enticing him," said the Lord. "Go and do it." So now the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of this prophet of yours. The Lord had decreased disaster for you. The Zadok son of Chemra went up and slapped Micah in the face. "Which was did the spirit from the Lord go when he went from me to speak to you?" he asked. Micah replied, "You will find out the day you go to hide in a room." The king of Israel then ordered, "Take Micah and send him back to Ammon, the ruler of the city of Judah, king's son," and said, "This is what the king says. This is what the Put this fellow in the prison and give him nothing but bread and water until I return safely." Micah declared, "If you ever return safely, the Lord has not spoken through me." Then he added, "Mark my words, all you people." So the king of Israel and Jephthah, king of Judah, went up to Ramoth-Gilead. The king of Israel said to Jephthah, "I will enter the battle in disguise, but you wear your royal robes." So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had ordered his chariot commanders, "Do not fight with anyone, small or great, except the kings of Israel. When the chariot commanders saw Jephthah, they thought, "This is the king of Israel." So they returned to attack him, but Jephthah cried out, and the Lord helped him. God drew them away from him. For when the chariot commanders saw that he was not the king of Israel, they stopped pursuing him. But someone drew his bow and ran and hit the king of Israel between the section of his armor. The king told the chariot driver, "Wheel around and get me out fighting. I've been wounded." All day long the battle raged, and the king of Israel propped himself up in his chariot, facing the armies until evening. Then at sunset he died.